Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. All right. Okay, so thanks everybody. I'm so glad you guys are doing this. This is so great. And glad that I'm able to participate here for the first few minutes where I am out here enjoying lovely Logan, Utah, where it's snowing today. So that storm is heading your way. Hopefully it won't hit you guys with snow. Uh, so I'm going to talk about the water quality framework. So a lot of you may or may not be familiar with this. We've been talking about this for some time, but I'm going to give you just a basic overview of the water quality framework and how we see that as a vision that ties everything together. So I am the water quality framework lead, so I oversee how this concept is implemented across all of our systems, and I've been around the water program for several years now. So first of all, just to kind of talk a little bit about the big picture idea, what is the water quality framework? How does it fit into the bigger picture? And the way that I like to try to describe this is how do we try to answer questions? So especially from the outside perspective. So somebody outside EPA, they may be standing down there in the right-hand corner wondering, what's going on in my watershed? What's going on with the waters in my backyard? So that this graphic here in the center of my screen is a watershed. My oldest daughter likes to call it a leaf. She said, "Dad, that looks like a leaf." I said, "No, it's a watershed." So it's a watershed. So we ask a number of questions, right? So not only we ask these questions at EPA, but also the outside folks ask these questions as well. They ask questions like, "What's the water quality like nationwide? What's water quality in my state?" Or they may want to know, how is the water quality in my particular river? How is the Bear River? What does the water quality look like there? And to answer that question, we have a whole series of different programs throughout EPA. To answer the question about what's water quality look like nationwide, we have the national surveys. To answer the question about what's water quality in a certain state, we have the state scale surveys that help answer that question. And then if you want to know what's the water quality like in a particular water body, then we've got these site-specific assessments that the states conduct that they then share through their 305B or 303D reports. And another kind of point is that each one of these data components lives in a different system. They're not all together. And then in addition to that, we've got the monitoring data, which I know you guys are going to talk a lot about today, that drives all of these decisions, that also lives in yet another system. And then that comes to a conclusion. So based on that monitoring data, you get some conclusion, like in this case, aquatic life use not supporting. And then folks from the outside might want to ask the question, well, what's being done about all this? So you have all of this information, you find out that maybe there's a problem. Well, what's being done to restore that water? And so then we have other pieces of information that we capture. We capture planning activities, and when you hear planning activities, a perfect example of a planning activity would be something like a TMDL. Under the new 303D vision, we also have TMDL alternatives as well that are possibilities, but there's also protection plans or also a different type of planning activity. So you have some sort of planning activity that will guide your future activities in a watershed. And then you have actions that are done to restore water quality. So these could be implementing a TMDL, they could be a 319 non-point source grant that has a series of actions that are going to restore water quality. They could be the revision of a permit. So there's all these actions that go to restore water quality. And again, different data systems for capturing all that information as well. And then we can ask questions, well, what impact do all of those activities and actions, what impact do those have on the national or state scale? And so those feed back. So we see those actions should, in theory, feed back, and we should see some indication that those actions or those activities that we're conducting are having some impact on water quality nationwide or having some impact on water quality at the state scale or even on specific waters. Are they improving specific water quality? And then to really make the question hard is then you ask the question, well, how does all this change over time? So as we implement all of this over time, how are things changing? Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? Is water quality getting better? Is water quality getting worse? Where are we making some impact? And being able to report all of this back to not only the public, but also the Congress has been fairly challenging. So as you look at the screen, this is really just this is how we try to describe water quality to the public. And the challenge that we have with our existing systems is, like I said, every single piece of information here is in a different system and is often on different web pages, different locations. And so they might be able to go to one web page and find out, well, what does the monitoring data say? They go to another web page and find out, well, what was the aquatic life conclusion for that particular water. They go to another web page and find out where's the planning activities that have been conducted, what do the TMDLs say, and then being able to track all this stuff over time is almost impossible. We haven't been able to tell that story really at all, which is how are things changing over time, aside from maybe through the national surveys, which get repeated every 5 years. So it's a pretty significant challenge for us to try to tell this story. And so the water quality framework is really about trying to do away with the silos that we have. I apologize, I don't know why that keeps popping up. To do away with the silos that we have within our systems that keep us from being able to tell this story in a coherent way to not only the public, but also to Congress, and also to ourselves as well. Because the other piece to this is that each one of these components is often in different programs in the states and EPA. And so it's difficult often for somebody who is down here in the actions section, maybe in the permits program, to really know, okay, what monitoring data are available? What were the site-specific assessment conclusions that were done on that water? What are the TMDLs that have been completed on that water, and what are the impacts of those? Because I need to look at my permit. So it's difficult for them to be able to get access to that information to be able to make those decisions. Same is true for somebody who's developing a TMDL. You know, they want to know, well, what's the monitoring data? It may not always be easy for them to get their hands on that monitoring data. Or they may want to know what are the permits or what other actions have been done that I need to take into account in developing this TMDL. So that's not easy for them to get access to that information. Or another great example is the 319 program. You know, as the 319 plans are being developed, are they taking into consideration the TMDLs and the monitoring data? Is it easy for them to get access to that information to be able to make those decisions? So the water quality framework is really all about trying to streamline this and make it clearer to the people who are trying to use the information, not only at the EPA level, but also at the public and congressional level as well. So I'm going to pause there because this is kind of the big picture idea and ask if there are any questions. Okay, so the water quality framework is built upon the core systems that we have within the Office of Wetlands, Oceans, and Watersheds. So we have data system to capture the water quality monitoring data, which is STORRET WQX, which you guys are going to talk a lot about today. We have a system for tracking the assessment conclusions, the TMDLs, and the restoration plans. So that's the ATTAIN system. We have a system for capturing these actions. So the 319 non-point source grants tracking system is a system with an OWOW that tracks the actions. And then we also have the geospatial fabric, which is kind of what ties everything together, which is a key component of the water quality framework, which is the NHD+. So the goal of the framework is to try to streamline this process from monitoring to assessment to the development of restoration plans to actions, which then lead to follow-up monitoring, which then lead to further assessment. So it's really trying to streamline our systems so that they fit together with one another. We are in the process of evaluating each of these systems as we update them to try to change them in such a way that they are better integrated with one another. The first one that we are interacting with is the ATTAIN system. So that system is being revised right now, and we're redesigning it in such a way that it will better support the STORRET WQX and is better integrated with the STORRET WQX, and also planning forward to being able to have it better integrated with the GRIT system as well. And even though I'm only identifying here the OWOW systems, the framework concept is certainly much broader than this. We are considering and looking at the ISIS-NPDES system to see, okay, what can we do to better integrate with the permits program. We're also even considering how could we better integrate with things that are outside of EPA. So, for example, efforts that are conducted by NRCS through their EQIP program, where they give money out to do watershed restoration. So how can we better capture that information so that somebody who is doing monitoring or is doing a TMDL can get access to that information as well? So the one thing I do want to say is, so the water quality framework, we're not talking about building one giant system. Water quality framework is really just looking at, as we look at these different systems, how can they be designed in such a way that their data and information is open and accessible to the other systems, so that if I'm a monitoring person, I'm most interested in the STORRET data, that it's very seamless for me to get access to the ATTAINS data as well. And there's connections between the two. The other big concept behind the water quality framework is really a relook at all of our performance measures that we have. So I don't know how many of you are involved in performance measures. If you are, you certainly understand the challenges that we have in being able to report some of these performance measures and how well they actually do reflect the work that we're doing. So what we're really trying to do as part of the water quality framework is trying to integrate our performance measures into our data in such a way that the performance measures are really just a report off of the data, as opposed to something that is an afterthought at the end of a fiscal year that we have to scramble and put together information for. Rather, instead of that, it would be, I run a report on a data system, there's my measure, and it's backed up by the data that's in the system. The other concept behind the water quality framework also is that we want our measures to build upon one another. So for example, you would have your 303D or your TMDL measures of your plans in place. Well, that builds up into, based on those waters, where are you implementing activities, where are you conducting additional monitoring, and then where are you seeing water quality standards attainment, and then also pulling that into the national survey scale information as well, and the state scale survey data too, so that we're able to tell this whole story from when a water is impaired all the way to when it's restored. And we're able to tell that story in a seamless and consistent way, so that we're telling the story the same way throughout the whole process, as opposed to, for the TMDL program, we talk about it in one way, and then for the water quality assessment and restoration program, we talk about it in a different way. So we're really trying to make sure we can tell that story the whole way from beginning to end, so that you can track that water from when it's first impaired all the way to when it's restored. I'm going to touch briefly on this because this is a critical piece of the water quality framework. Like I said, the ATTAINS redesign is the first system to undergo revisions as part of the water quality framework. And what we're trying to do within the ATTAINS redesign is really streamline the process of reporting the 303D, 305B integrated reporting information, and also the TMDL information as well. The concept being that we integrate the data into the entire process. So instead of the 303D report being a paper document or the 303D list being a paper document that comes into the region at the end of the process, instead it would be electronically submitted, and it would be submitted much, much earlier, possibly at the draft stage or the public review comment stage, so that EPA and the states can have a much better interaction with one another, and they're able to be looking at the same electronic data, including reports that allow the region to be able to do a more automated review of the 303D list, and also be able to give that feedback in electronic fashion, and that the data isn't just an afterthought, something that happens at the end of the process, but rather is integrated through the entire process, and also enables us to be more transparent to the public as well. And if you guys are interested in more about this, we can certainly set up another presentation sometime to talk about the ATTAINS redesign. So also, I want to talk a little bit about some of the new measures and how measures are being changed as a result of the water quality framework. So the NHD Plus is a key piece of these new measures. Some of you may have heard of our new catchment approach for tracking progress. So the NHD Plus is the key component for that tracking of progress. So just to give you a brief intro into that. The NHD Plus is made up of three key pieces. It has the hydrography, which is the streamlines and the water body components. And that's all at the 1 to 100,000 scale. It also contains the watershed boundary data set. So the watershed boundary data set, these are the watersheds. These are the polygons that contain the waters. And then the last piece is the national elevation data set. So this is at 10 meter and 30 meter resolution, so that we've got the elevation that allows us to be able to draw a mini watershed around every single stream in the NHD Plus. And these are those catchments. So it draws a mini little catchment around every single stretch of stream within the NHD Plus. And we use those catchments as tiny little reporting units that allow us to be able to report on measures, that allows us to be able to track progress over time. So they've been really a key component of the water quality framework. And this graphic here just gives you a vision for how that works. So what you see here in the middle is this blue line. Consider that an impaired water. You see this purple line here is the watershed boundary data set. So that's the 12-digit HUC that surrounds that watershed. And what we do is we use some automated procedures to correspond the catchments, which are these little red blocks here, to correspond those with the impaired water. which then allows us to be able to track progress over time based on these catchments. The nice thing about this is it doesn't matter if the state changes its assessment unit. They could rename it, they could re-identify it, they could split it. At the end of the day, we are still able to tie everything to these catchments and then report at that catchment level, which is a huge improvement over how we've been able to do things in the past. So, for example, you could ask a question like, show me all of the areas that are newly impaired from the prior cycle. And let's say, for example, the state had added this catchment here, they had added that water as an impaired water. This would show up, that catchment would show up as a newly impaired water in this cycle, which is the kind of thing we've never been able to do before. The other neat thing about the catchments is it allows us to integrate across programs too. So let's say, for example, imagine there was a permanent facility right here. So we'd be able to tie the permanent facility to that catchment as well, so that we could say, well, there's a permanent facility within this same watershed as this stream right here that's impaired, which allows us to, again, tell that story in a better way. Or we can even expand it off the watershed as well if we needed to. So let's say, for example, there was a RCRA facility over here somewhere. It gives us the ability to tie that to the watershed too. So we can say, oh, there's a hazardous waste facility over here that possibly may be impacting this water. It allows us to be able to tell that story. So this is the kind of thing we're able to do with these catchments that we've never really been able to do before. So I'm going to again pause. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly possible. So the catchments they're about 1 mile in size on average. For you guys up in the Northeast or region 2, that stays pretty true. They tend to get a little bit bigger out west. Where I'm at now, the catchments are a little bit bigger. Um, but yeah, so if for example the lat long for that permitted facility is not that good, let's say that the lat long, if the facility is right here, but the lat long puts it over here somewhere, then yeah, so that would be a problem. It would put it in the wrong catchment. The nice thing is that they are still hydrologically connected, so you would still pick it up if you were to say, go upstream and pull everything that is upstream of this point. It still would grab that catchment and say, yeah, there's this permanent facility is upstream. However, if the lat long is over here somewhere, yeah, it's not going to work. So there really is there's no easy way around bad data, regretfully. So Huck 14s really only exist in New Jersey, to my knowledge. Huck 14s are a little bit bigger than these catchments in most cases. In some cases, they're a little bit smaller. And they do line up okay. They don't line up perfectly, and we have run New Jersey's data through our catchment process to see how well they line up. It does okay. But right now, Huck 14s are only available in New Jersey. So this is actually a pretty good example of that. So the assessment unit in this case would be the blue line, and then each of these catchments get associated with that blue line. Does that answer your question? Yep, it's all automated. And I think you ask a good question because we actually get this quite a bit. What we've been telling the states is, and a lot of states jumped into this at first, they're like, oh my goodness, we need to change all of our assessment units to become catchments. We said, no, 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 no. Don't do that. Keep your assessment units as they are. Continue to track your information the way you've always tracked them. We will use the catchments as a mechanism for tying everything together. So we have an automated process that takes these blue lines and corresponds them with the catchments. We can run it very quickly. We can run an entire state in 10 minutes to an hour at most. And we're able to process all that data, tie it to the catchments, do a QA, QC on it. We've got updated data pretty quickly. So yeah, so what we say to the states is keep doing things the way you've always done it, and we will translate it to the catchments. That doesn't really matter from this perspective. Whatever mechanism they use to make that conclusion doesn't really matter, because the conclusion will be about the assessment unit, whatever that assessment unit is. This assessment unit could be, I mean, this is just an example of a line being an assessment unit. It could be this entire 12-digit HUC. We have a few states that do things like that. That's fine too. So what we would do in that case is just tie all the catchments in that 12-digit HUC to that assessment unit. So whatever method states use to do their assessments, it doesn't really matter, at least from the perspective of the catchment process. That's one of the other big benefits of this, is that the catchments make it somewhat of an even playing field across all of the states too, because we were having that situation where some states were defining their assessment units as tiny little bitty segments. Maybe only this piece right here is one assessment unit, and then other states were doing entire 12-digit HUCs as their assessment units. And then for our reporting purposes, for reporting measures, we were counting those as the same. So if a state did a TMDL for this little tiny watershed or this tiny little stream versus they did a TMDL for the entire 12-digit HUC, we counted that as one. And so it didn't really matter what their assessment units looked like. We always counted them the same. So the catchments kind of even that playing field, and that for our measures purposes, we just count the areas that correspond to that particular water. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so a number of benefits about the catchment approach. It simplifies the tracking of site-specific outcomes, so it allows us really to be able to track outcomes better than we've ever really been able to do before. One of the things that has been a huge challenge for us over the years in being able to report progress is just states change their segmentation over time. They change their assessment unit names, etc. It becomes really hard for us to be able to report that, so it really focuses much more on outcomes. It also improves our output measures, so the TMDL measures, the new 303D vision measures, if you guys are familiar with those are our first set of measures that are undergoing revisions as a result of this new approach. And so far, so good. It seems to be working really well as a way to track progress. It's much, much simpler to be able to track progress and way more transparent than we've ever been able to do before. It's going to really support a lot better improved measures tracking. We have a whole of challenges with our measures, including the one that I just mentioned about states changing their assessment units over time, and also the issue of different state assessment unit sizes has been a big issue with our measures tracking. It resolves all of those issues, and it makes it so that the measures are really just a report off of the system, as opposed to something at the end of every fiscal year, everybody's scrambling trying to figure out how many SP10s or SP11s they have, or how many WQ8s, which were the old TMDL measures. So all of that goes away. Instead, it's going to be, we push a button, we run a report, you verify that report's correct. It's much more transparent as well. One of the big challenges that we had with our prior measures is that we would say, okay, here's how many SP10, here's how many water quality restorations we had. But we really couldn't point to where were those waters in specific where that restoration had happened. And so by having the system of record, the new Attain system, and these systems that we're developing being the system of record for these conclusions, it allows us to be able to point back to the system and say, okay, the states were able to restore these many square miles or these many acres of catchment. Where are those? Well, here they are on a map. Here's where you can find those restorations. Here are the waters that have been restored. It allows for us to have better cross-program integration, so we can better integrate across all of the water programs. And also, again, like I said before, it gives the opportunity to integrate across other programs as well. Moving into the waste program, it allows us to be able to integrate better with them as well. And the last, and certainly not the least, is it significantly reduces the amount of resources that we have to spend at headquarters in processing states data. We used to have to spend several $100,000s a year to process state geospatial data. We probably will be able to reduce that by 90%. It's a huge savings as to how much we're able to cut back on our processing, because it's all automated. Are the only resources we really have to spend on this data processing now is really just on the QA/QC piece. So we do QA/QC everything that we run through the automated process, but the time difference is huge. We used to have to spend hundreds of hours to process data. Now it takes us about 4 to 8 hours to do the QA/QC, which is just a huge, huge savings. And it also allows us to be able to turn the data around much quicker. So it used to take us months to years to process the data and turn it back to the states and regions for review. That's now going to be a day to a week to be able to get the data back. So it's just a huge, huge improvement over what we've been able to do before. Another piece, and Britt's going to talk more about this, so I'm not going to touch too deeply on this, but I'd want to definitely get across that this isn't all just about water quality assessment information. Under the framework, another major activity that we have underway is looking at how we can better enable the sharing of sensor data. So as you guys are going to learn and discuss today in pretty significant length, you're really going to talk about the sample data, and that's really what STORAT-WQX does very well. It's designed very well for that. But it doesn't work very well for the sensor data. That data is really just different. It's a different type of data. It's structured differently. The STORAT-WQX data model can certainly hold it, but it doesn't hold it efficiently. So what we have is another project that's underway right now where we are exploring different ways to be able to enable the sharing of the sensor data. We have a number of demonstration projects. We have 2 demonstration projects that we're working on right now. One is actually in New Jersey. It's in the Hackensack-Passaic River. Like I said, Britt will talk a little bit more about that. And it's fairly exciting. So what we're looking at is really trying to enable the ability for sensor data, all sensor data, so again, not just water quality data, but all sensor data to be discoverable in a common network so that you can go to a website, discover what water quality sensors are out there, what they're monitoring, what water quantity sensors are out there, what the stream gauges are. And you can say, okay, I'm interested in this particular type of data. I'm interested in pH data in this watershed. And the system would be able to go out to the source, retrieve the data for you, and return it back to you in a common format, regardless of who it's getting the data from. So it could be pulling the data from multiple sources and bring that data back to you in one common format, much the way that the water quality portal works now, where it brings back to you the data from all the different parties in one common format. And that's been a huge savings for folks. So we're looking to replicate that same type of savings through the sensor data. So I'm not going to go into much more detail here because Britt is going to cover this in much more detail than I am here. But I will pause just real quick if there are any brief questions, or you guys can also just wait till Britt talks about it. Any questions about this? Oh, very good question. So the Attains redesign is underway right now. The first iteration of the Attains system, our draft implementation, will be released in May of this year, so May 2016. The plan is we will be testing that system over the next 6 months or so. So we've got a number of states that have volunteered to try the new system out. And once that testing is done, we will make revisions to the system, update it, get any final capabilities in it for an April 2017 release, so that being 1 year before the 2018 reports are due. So 2017 is when the new system will be up and running. Also over 2017, we'll be releasing the new public website as well that starts to integrate all the information together. So it's basically over the next 2 years for the Attains system. As we ramp down our development on Attains, also look forward to what we will be doing is ramping up on some development on WQX. So you've heard probably a little bit about WQX 3.0. So we've been having some discussion about making some changes to WQX as well to also support a little bit better this water quality framework. I don't think we'll do much with WQX. I think it was really already designed with this kind of capability in mind, but there may be a few things that we need to do. So that'll be another thing that we'll be doing. So the framework as an overall project is ongoing. So basically the way the framework works is that we work on one system, update that system. When that system is done, then we move on to the next one. So it's kind of a continual process of improvement as we move across the systems. Does that answer your question? Okay, so I think this is my last slide. Just wanted to leave some key takeaways for you guys. So the framework really is built upon it, and I want to keep this in mind, is that even though I've talked a lot about assessment, the underlying water quality monitoring data is really critical to having a successful framework. So what you guys are going to be talking about today about getting data available through STORAT and WQX and doing QA/QC on that data is absolutely critical to making the framework work. It's that base layer that allows us to be able to tie everything else together. So I really can't stress that enough. I talked a little bit about the schedule. It's always a good thing to remind folks. 2018 is actually pretty soon. That's only 2 years away. What we have been saying to the states is that the Attain system will be the only way to submit that 303D, 305B data. So starting in April of 2018, that's going to be the only way to do it. So there will be some states that will need to do some things to make that transition happen. We also, the new Attain system will be the system of record for the 303D list. It'll be the system of record for TMDLs. And it'll also provide a mechanism for the regions to do their review of those 303D lists. So all of that will happen within the Attain system. And then the other really key thing that's part of this work, and having Brent Gaylord on the phone. Brent, glad you could join today. Brent is one of our regional data management coordinators, and one of the other visions that we've had of the framework is that we wanted to build capacity within the regions to be able to support these systems across the framework. So really just having a point person within the region that can answer questions about the Attain system, knows who to talk to about STORAT, knows how some of the GIS pieces work and how the catchments work, and how all of those pieces fit together, so that they can be the point person not only for the region but also for the states. And Brent has volunteered to do that for us, so really appreciate him on doing that. We really see that as a key piece for making the framework work, because what we want to make sure that we're able to do is that it's not just headquarters that has that capability. We want to make sure that the regions have also a good understanding of all these systems, because I think it's much more valuable if you can go to someone that's just down the hall from you as opposed to having to call somebody down in headquarters about a particular question. All right, any questions about the key takeaways or any other final questions before I drop off? Yeah, thanks, Brent. The other thing that I'll just point out quickly, so that we do have a SharePoint site which is open for everybody within EPA. There's a tremendous amount of information there on all of the projects across the water quality framework. There's information there on the sensors project. There's information on Attains. There's information on STORAT. There's information there about some of the new things which I didn't touch on at all as part of the framework, which is trying to improve how states are able to do the water quality assessments. So we're building tools that enable states to be able to discover data and to do water quality assessments in a more efficient way. So there's information on all of that there as well. So there's just really a wealth of information up on that site. So I would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to check that out, check out that SharePoint site, and you should be able to get access to it and download any of the information that we have. All right, any other questions?